Hey everyone, welcome this afternoon. I am doing this live stream because I got an email this morning from one of my students who asked why her 1 day old baby goat died. And the last time she saw him, he was bouncing around and looked fine. And then she went out this morning and he was dead. And so um, the first thing I want to say, and I will tell you a bunch of reasons in a minute, but the first thing I want to say is if you really, really want to know why a goat died, is that you need to get a necropsy. Otherwise, it's just guessing. Even if you think it looks obvious why it died, you could be completely wrong. I have sent goats in for a necropsy before thinking that I knew what it was, and it came back being something completely different. I will, I learned this very early on when I had a goat that tested positive for Tisser's disease. That is a rodent disease. Every now and then I'll search the scholarly literature to see, like, has there been a case of Tisser's disease recorded yet in a goat? And there hasn't, which makes me wonder, like, why didn't they write up a paper on this? But maybe they just thought, well, this is just too weird and a very bizarre anomaly. And like, we don't know why, how this happened. So you really never know why a goat died unless you get a necropsy. And the thing is, I personally prefer to have it done at a university vet hospital, unless you know that your local vet is going to do more than just because I've heard of some that just do a gross necropsy, and gross does not mean yucky. Gross means that they just cut the goat open and look to see if there's anything physically obvious. And very often you need lab work. You need pathology, you need histopathology, you need all kinds of lab work to figure out if there's really something going on that you can't see, because very frequently it's something that you can't see that actually killed a goat. So if you are thinking, well, like in my case, the University Vet Hospital is 2 hours away. And so sometimes I'll put a goat in a baby goat. You can't really do this with a big goat, but if it's a baby goat, you can double bag it and put it near a refrigerator. And then take it in when you have time, because that's actually what they're going to do with it when you get it there. Is they're going to put it in a refrigerator, a cooler, until they actually do the necropsy on it. So if you can't go in right away, like you have to wait a day or something, you can put it in a refrigerator until you take it in. You do need to protect it from freezing, because some things are not affected. Like, livers, you freeze liver before you send it in to be tested for a mineral panel, but other things are going to be destroyed by freezing. So you want to protect it from freezing. So if your temperatures outside are like, in the 40s, that's perfect. Or upper 30s, that's perfect. That's going to keep it refrigerator temperature, even if it's a bigger goat. But you want to be sure that it does not freeze, so that you preserve all of the tissues and everything that they're going to look at. Now, one of the things about baby goats is there's a variety of things that could be wrong with them. I mean, literally just use your imagination. I think about some of the animals that have had abnormalities that are physically obvious that I could see from the outside. We had a kid born one time that had the intestines on the outside of the body, like the whole bundle of intestines. Like it looked like this big blob of worms coming out of the goat's belly. And like there's nothing that you can do about that. And that goat, unfortunately, like it was just super heartbreaking, because it was acting so completely normal. It was trying to stand and stuff. And, I had to call my husband and ask him to put it down, because obviously a goat cannot survive when its intestines are on the outside of its body. We also had a long, long time ago, we had a kid born that was missing the back of its skull. And that kid died like within 10 minutes. It died while I was helping to dry off the second kid. It had been the first kid that was born. And so while I was drying off the second kid, that one died. So it didn't live very long. And then I had a lamb one time that was born, and it never stood. I could not nurse. And it So I milked mom and gave it colostrum in a bottle. And a couple hours later, it started having convulsions. And I took it in the house and I started trying to call some sheep breeders. And the person that answered the phone was this lady who said, "Does he have an anus?" And I was like, "What?" Like, it's one of those Twilight Zone kind of questions. You're like, "What are you talking about?" And she repeated it, and I was holding him in my lap, and I looked, and I lifted his tail and I looked, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, he doesn't." That's so weird. Like, I never would have thought to look. So, that's something that, like, yeah, I could see it, but I never would have thought to look to see if that was the case. Not every kid or lamb is going to have convulsions after a couple hours, because I've actually had people email me about this, that they had a kid born without an anus, and it lived for one person. It was born in the evening, and it was weird. Crazy enough, it was still alive the next morning when they took it to the vet to have it euthanized. And which I don't know how it survived that long, because I know somebody else who had a couple of kids that died after 8 hours without colostrum. So I don't know if they gave it some colostrum during that time to make it feel better, or what, but it did survive long enough for them to take it to the vet to have it euthanized the next morning. So there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. Now, you have no idea of what everything looks like inside that kid's body. So there could be something really wrong inside of the kid's body. There could be something wrong with the lungs or the intestines, or, any body part that means it's not going to survive for more than about a day. And then it's going to die. Now, one thing that is extremely important, and I think a lot of kids probably die from starvation within the first day. A lot of times when somebody is new, I have seen people all across the board from A to Z, from people who are like the most nervous Nelly, and they're nervous about everything under the sun, and they're freaking out if the kid hasn't nursed in 15 minutes. Not kidding, not exaggerating. I've seen it happen. It's like, just give it some time. It's fine. Like, it doesn't have to nurse within 15 minutes. To the other hand, that person who called me when her kids were 8 hours old and still had not nursed. Now, just because you've seen them nurse doesn't mean they got enough milk. So this is why we weigh all of our kids every single day for the first 2 weeks. Why for 2 whole weeks? Because we have Nigerian dwarfs, and during that first 2 weeks, they double their birth weight, and their consumption of milk is based on their weight. So that means their milk consumption is going to double in those first 2 weeks. So just because mom's making enough milk to feed them when they're 2 or 3 days old does not mean she's going to be making enough to feed them when they're a week or 10 days or 2 weeks old, because her supply is going to have to double in those first 2 weeks. So that's why we are tracking it daily for the first 2 weeks, because if a kid starts to fall behind, we want to know about it as soon as possible so that we can start supplementing them, or just take them away entirely and bottle feed them. So that's very important. Within the first day, and this is crazy, when I got started with goats, everybody said, "Oh, just feel their tummy. It's right behind their ribs. It should feel like a little golf ball." And that is what we did for the first 10 years that we had goats. I mean, you still see this on Facebook. "Oh, just feel the tummy. Is it full?" That just means they've nursed. It doesn't mean they've nursed enough. And so that's why weighing them is really, really important. My husband is an engineer, and he's not an animal person. Not saying engineers can't be animal people, but he's not. And so it was 11 years ago, or 12, 13, anyway, a long time ago, when he first started helping me after our youngest daughter went off to college, I smashed my knee. Like, my knee was like swollen up like a football. I could not bend my leg at all. I was in bed. And so all of a sudden, he was plunged into managing kidding season all by himself. So I was like sitting on my bed with my leg up, watching the TV, which was hooked up to our monitor in the barn, watching everything happen. And this doe had a couple of twins that he never saw them nurse. And so I'm like, well, milk mom, give her a bottle. And he kept, and I just kept saying, well, feel their tummy. Does their tummy feel full? And that did not work. And so he's an engineer. What do engineers do when they want to be reassured of anything? They start collecting data. So that's exactly what he did. He started weighing those kids. And he, in fact, he started weighing all of our kids. And that is when I learned that golf ball behind the ribs thing is just a ridiculous idea. I mean, yeah, that's what we did for 10 years. Like, that's what everybody said to do. And that's what you still see a lot of people doing. And that's why I think a lot of kids die when they're 1 day old, is because basically they haven't had enough milk, or they may die at 2 days or 4 days or whatever, because they're not getting enough milk. So it's really, really important to weigh them every day for the first 2 weeks to make sure they're getting enough milk. The thing is, we've also started doing this with our sheep. And one of the things that we discovered, because you would think, oh, well, she had a single, she's like a 4 or 5 year old mom. She's that lamb is going to be growing like a draft horse, he's going to be huge. And so 2 or 3 years ago, we had a ewe that gave birth to a single, and she was like 4 or 5 years old. She was an experienced mom. And our sheep, we raise Katahdin sheep. We expect them to gain half a pound a day. We expect our Nigerian dwarfs to gain 4 ounces a day. And that lamb did not gain hardly any weight at all. And when my husband told me that, I was like, oh my God, check the udder. And he checked the udder. It was hot. It was hard. And when he went to milk it, he got a very small amount of very bloody milk. So that lamb would have died, and the mom would have died if we had not been weighing the lamb. So that is why I am like such a big proponent of this. And you don't hear about this, from like extension and stuff, because their information is geared towards people that have like giant sheep farms. And, I'll be the first one to admit it's not practical to be weighing 200 lambs every day, so but most of the people who are watching this video, most of the people who are, my newsletter subscribers and my students, they've got like 10 or 20 animals that they are breeding. And so, and they're not all, they don't have, 10 lambs a day or 10 kids a day. They are, and so it is doable for you. And most people love their babies and they don't want them to die. And so if you don't want them to die, you really need to be weighing them every day, both for the lamb or the kid's health and also for the mom's health, because like that ewe that we had that had mastitis, like we never would have known that, probably first thing we would have seen is the dead lamb. And I would love to say, oh, we would have checked the mom. No, we wouldn't have. We would have just been like, oh, that's so sad. The lamb died. There must have been something wrong with him when he was born. And the mom probably would have wound up dead also, because we wouldn't have realized that something was wrong. So it's very important that you weigh the kids or lambs every day. And so hopefully you have found this helpful. Oh, Paula says, I had a kid born during the middle of the day when I was not there, and his dam did not bag up, or at least not much. I gave kid a bottle of milk from another goat. Any colostrum he got would have been from that very tiny udder, which I'm sure was not much. He did well. His dam finally bagged up normal a week later. She was a first freshener. Yeah, so that's, he did, I'm sure he probably got more than you think if you did well. Like I said, they only have to have 10%. Or did I say that? I say this so much, I feel like I'm saying it all the time. If I didn't say that, this is in my bottle feeding guide on my website. A kid needs 5% of its body weight in colostrum within the first 6 hours and 10% within the first 24 hours. 20% is even better. And that's my goal. In fact, I like to get, if I have a kid that's having trouble learning how to nurse, I personally want to get 10% of its body weight into it before I go to bed. Like if a goat gives birth like at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not going to be out there for like 8 hours. I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night. So I want to make sure that it has plenty of colostrum in it so that I know it'll be fine until morning, even if it doesn't nurse again. And so when you calculate this, because I have an online class for University of Massachusetts, and about half of people get this question wrong on my quizzes. How much are you supposed to feed? They wind up doing the math. Like they think that 10% of 3 pounds is 3 ounces. It's not. This makes it harder for those of us in the US with our silly number system. People in Canada and the rest of the world have it so much easier because the metric system is so much easier to know what 10% of anything is. So when you are figuring a percentage of pounds, you have to convert it into ounces first. So that means, let's see, for easy math, let's go with a 5-pound kid. 5 times 16 is 5 pounds times 16 ounces is going to be 80 ounces. And that would mean, and 10% of 80 is 8. So bare minimum, that means that kid needs 4 ounces of colostrum within the first 6 hours and 8 ounces in the first 24 hours. If you can get 10 ounces into them in the first 6 hours, yay, I sleep way better. And if you can get 20 ounces into them in the first 24 hours, then that is also awesome. And that's the goal. Like I always put, I have in my bottle feeding article on my website, I've got a chart and we show you 5%, 10%, and 20%. We created this chart as a download when I realized how many people were doing the math wrong on this, even though I've got like a worksheet explaining the formula on the website. But we've got a chart. And the reason that I tell you 10% is so that you know, like, okay, I'm shooting for somewhere between 10 and 20%. 20% is the ideal. They can survive on 10%, but that's a short-term thing, okay? And usually it's not a problem at all to get kids to consume more. Like most of them are a lot of them take 20% and are like looking for more. In fact, I just responded to an email about that, like, or maybe it was a question on my website within the last couple of days. Somebody said, is it possible to overfeed a kid? Because I'm giving them 20% and they still act like they want more. Yes, you can overfeed them. What happens usually is if you give them too much in a single bottle, that they get diarrhea, and you don't need to do anything to stop it. Like it stops on its own. Just don't give them that much at one time anymore. At least not in the near future. Like you're always going to be increasing it, but if you gave them, if you gave them 4 ounces at one bottle, and then the next bottle you gave them was 5 ounces and they got diarrhea, go back to 4 ounces for a couple of days and then go back up again. So hopefully that helps. Honey Hollow Sorry, I just saw Honey Hollow Homestead on YouTube. It's so great to see you. I love all your questions and comments on all of the live streams. So hello. So anyway, I hope that has been helpful to all of you about why kids might die. Probably, like I said, just a quick summary for those of you who came in late. Probably the most common reason kids die within the first 24 hours is starvation because they're not nursing enough. If we have a kid that is having trouble, okay, so first of all, if it's having trouble, I give it a bottle. A lot of people worry about nipple confusion. And it's so weird. Goats are like the exact opposite of humans when it comes to that. With human babies, yeah, you give them a bottle and then they get confused about nursing. But with baby goats, it is the exact opposite. They totally get it when it comes to nursing, and taking an artificial nipple is so foreign to them. It's like somehow their brain knows how to nurse from mom, but taking a bottle is really challenging for them. And so I have never had an issue giving a kid a bottle at birth and then having it refuse to nurse or have trouble nursing or whatever. In fact, this is really hilarious. 2 years ago, we had a goat that had quintuplets, and they were all a good size. So we weren't sure, like, it wasn't a slam dunk, like if I have some that are under 2 pounds, like that, okay, you're my bottle babies, the smallest ones, you need my special TLC. But they were all nice and big. And so I was like, well, okay, this one kid never nursed, did not even seem interested in nursing. So I gave it a bottle and we left it with mom. The other four were like, oh, we'll figure out in the next few days, like who to put on a bottle. And this one kid was 2 or 3 days old. And like, we were going out there giving it a bottle and it was just sucking it down like a total bottle baby. And we never saw it nurse. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 days old. We went out there, picked it up, and it completely refused the bottle. Like, it acted like a damn raised kid. And sure enough, I put it down. It ran straight to mom's udder and started nursing. So that little kid learned how to nurse all on its own after 2 or 3 days of being exclusively bottle fed. The other thing is, we had a goat. This was probably like 8 or 9 years ago. We had a goat that almost bled to death after kidding. And so she spent a week at the University Vet Hospital, and her twin boys were at home, and I was bottle feeding them. And when she came home, I thought, well, it'll be nice to put her boys in there with her just for company, because she was still not looking good. Like, I couldn't believe it when they said, oh, she looks so good now. And I'm like, really? This is good? Doesn't look good to me. They're like, oh no, she's doing great. And I'm like, okay. Since the hospital's 2 hours away, I can't visit. And so I hadn't seen her since I dropped her off. So anyway, she was very lethargic. She's just like, just let me lay in this corner here and hide. So I put her in one of the kidding pens, and I put her two boys in there with her. And I was going out there on a regular basis, bottle feeding them. And one day after she'd been home for a couple of days, she was eating hay. So she was standing up. And while I was giving one kid the bottle, the other one was like jumping on me nonstop. And I'm like looking at his mom standing there, and I'm looking at him. And I thought, I wonder if it's possible to get a kid to nurse when it's a week old and has never nursed before. And I stuck that kid underneath her just like I would a newborn at birth. And I just like lifted his little mouth up, brushed the nipple across his mouth, and he latched on just like that and started nursing just like he'd been nursing his whole life. And that was the end of his bottle fed days. And the other one, of course, wasn't interested at that point because I had just filled up his tummy with the bottle. So about 4 hours later, instead of taking a bottle out there, I went out there and like did the same thing with him, and he also caught on. So I have had two kids get started on mom when they were a week old after being totally bottle fed up until that point. So it is not a big deal at all to give kids a bottle of colostrum, mom's colostrum at birth, if they're having trouble nursing. I would much rather do that and know, like, okay, I know you have this much, than be worried about them not having anything. And then if I still have any concerns, like we do weigh them sometimes, like after 12 hours. And with my Nigerian dwarfs, I expect 4 ounces weight gain per day. And so if it's 12 hours, I just don't want to see a loss in that first 12 hours. I want to see an ounce or two. And sometimes we go out after 12 hours and we see they've already gained 3 or 4 ounces. And I'm like, whoa. And then, I mean, if it's 4 ounces, you might not see another change in 12 hours later, because maybe they just nursed before you weighed them, after 12 hours. And so, and so on. Anyway, so nursing and peeing can have a little bit to do with it. So I'm looking for a 4 ounce gain every day. So some days might be 3, some days might be 5. I want that to average out to 4 ounces a day. Honey Hollow said, my surviving triplet has transitioned very well from bottle to mom. Just need to get mom to love her baby again. Oh, that's sweet. I know that was my big thing too. Like with that mom that had been in the hospital for a week, I wasn't sure how she was going to respond to having kids nurse on her, but totally, she was perfectly happy to have them start nursing. So that was really nice when that happened. I loved it. All right, guys. So that is it for today. Feel free to, if you're watching this later, feel free to post in the comments section below and I'll get back to you. Have a great day and happy kidding season. Oh, I totally messed up on my last live. I said this weekend is when our last doe is due. My brain was like on next weekend. Next weekend is when our last doe is due. So, oh, you're tying up the mom. Okay, if you were tying up the mom, it's not going to happen. It's very, we tried that. We didn't tie her. We just held her. We tried that once and it was like for days. I would way better. It is just so much easier to bottle feed than to do that. Not to mention the fact that the goat is usually being traumatized. She's like screaming bloody murder, like she's being treated badly. So I would, if she's not doing it, I would just switch to a bottle because that is it's easier and you know exactly how much they're getting. If you're having to hold her and letting the kid nurse, you really have no idea how much they're getting. So it's safer for the kid if you just give it a bottle. So all right, we will talk to you later. Bye.